Hey there, my people, and welcome. Today, I'd like to introduce you to an episode from ALFRED Hitchcock Presents One More for the Road. It's a very simple story, peeps. Charles and Marsha are married. Charles is stepping out on Marsha with Beryl. What happens when Marsha finds out about Beryl, who is pressuring Charles to divorce Marsha and marry her? Let's find out. The scene opens with Marsha helping Charles as he prepares to leave on a business trip. She helps him on with his jacket and she grabs his wallet and handkerchief. As she hands him the items, he asks, "Don't we have an anniversary coming up next week?" "Uh-huh," she says. "Which one is it?" he asks. "Fourth? Fifth?" Marsha smiles, saying, "You know very well it's the 11th. Charles says, "Well, if a package comes while I'm away, no fair peeking." She tucks a handkerchief into his breast pocket, and he asks, "Do I have everything?" "Uh-huh," she says. Charles turns, and Marsha says this.
"You might return this to your lady friend."
Where'd you get that?
Your gray suit.
Must be my secretary's. I'm always borrowing hers.
Those are not Miss Englewood's initials.
Uh-oh, peeps. Now comes the fancy two-stepping. Charles says, "I'll be darned if I know where I got it." There you go. If you get jammed up, fake ignorance. I'm in a dozen offices every day. Marsha, not planning to let it go so easily, says, "Now try to think. What does the letters B.A. stand for?" "Bachelor of Arts," he quips, and they both chuckle, and then he pulls her in for a deep, distracting kiss. He says, "See you Friday, darling." He pecks her on the nose and says, "Love you," and he gives her a quick kiss. He grabs his suitcase and leaves. Okay, y'all, this dude is a punk already. Bachelor of Arts? Really? So you got jokes, huh? Marsha. Okay, to my old throwback peeps. I just wanted to get that out the way. Next, we find Charles at Beryl's place. You know, that's a cool name, Beryl. And she hands him a drink and says, "Now tell me if that's too dry." He takes a sip and smiles. Perfect. Then he says, "Is that another new dress you're wearing?" She says, "Yes, like it?" He goes, "You must spend all your time shopping." She says, "Well, I have to fill up those 4 days somehow." Okay, so let me get this right. It sounds like Brother Man is spending 4 days with the wife and 3 days with this Beryl chick. Wow, okay. Beryl snuggles close and says this.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could be together like this every night?
Oh, I don't know. Might be too much of a good thing.
Speak for yourself.
He is, baby girl. You're just not listening. Charles says, "They say the best romances are those with obstacles. It adds spice." Beryl gives him a playful hug, then stands. "Marriage doesn't have to be so dull," she says. "I bet ours wouldn't be." Charles comes up beside her. "Are we getting married?" he asks. "The penalty for bigamy is pretty severe, I've been told." Beryl says, "Darling, hasn't it ever occurred to you? Well, you can divorce Marsha." Okay, you know what, girl, you trying to get yourself choked out. Charles places the drink on the counter and says, "No." Okay, peeps, I can't even convey to you the way he said no. It wasn't a hard no, a harsh no. As a matter of fact, it was that calm, kind of quasi-quiet no that if you got 2 working brain cells, it would make you nervous. "She's a better cook than you," he says, trying to add a bit of levity, like that Bachelor of Arts quip he made to Marsha. "She makes wonderful coffee," he says. Beryl smiles and says, "Oh, you're not being serious." But Peeps, he is. She's just not listening. What if she finds out? Beryl says as she's fidgeting about the table. Charles says, "Oh, that reminds me."
She found this in one of my suits.
How'd you explain it?
I didn't have to explain it. Marsha isn't a jealous woman.
I'm sorry. I love you.
Back at home, Marsha has received a package, and ignoring Charles's request that she not open it, sister girl can't help herself. She's opened it. Marsha is smiling brightly as she's reading the enclosed card. Then she digs into the box and finds her gift. It's a vase, but it's clearly broken. Marsha places it back in the box and calls her husband's job. Speaking with Charles's secretary, Marsha says, "I know he's out of town. That's why I'm calling you." Then she asks, "Where in Lockton is he?" Then she goes on to ask the secretary, "Haven't you a number where he can be reached?" Then she says, "Yes, it is an emergency. You know what? I'm already get up out this chair, drive to the job, and choke this chick out. I'm this dude's wife. Why am I having this long, involved conversation with you? I'm answering your questions like I'm not married to this dude. You know what? You must not want your job. Miss Ellington, Ellingsworth, Elling, whoever you are. You must not want to be working. Why am I still having a conversation with you and this dude is my husband? Why are we doing 21 questions so I can get my husband's telephone number?" And you know, Peeps, back in the day, this is sort of kind of how it was. These folks didn't have cell phones. They had landlines. A landline at the house, a landline at the job. If they're out of town at a motel, hotel, it's a landline in the hotel, motel room. But see, this is what's messed up with Sister Girl's scenario. You mean to tell me your husband goes out of town 3 days out of the week and you don't have a number that he's left with you to where you can reach him? Or he might not know the number, so he gets to the hotel, he doesn't call and say, "Okay, baby, I'm here, I'm okay, and here's the number in case, there's an emergency." Sister Girl, come on. I'm not trying to be mad at you because this guy's slipping and sliding around on you, but gee whiz. Okay. I'm sorry, Peeps. That I was starting to take a little personal. All these questions. So the secretary gives Marsha the telephone number, and Marsha hangs up and then picks up the phone and dials the number. She's doodling while she's waiting for the connection.
Hello, who's this?
Beryl Abbott.
Well, I was given this number to reach Mr. Charles Hendricks.
You must have the wrong number.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We see that Charles is home from his business meeting. He's telling Marsha that he'll just have the vase replaced. "It's nothing to get so upset about," he says. Marsha says, "But I was upset, terribly upset. I'm not superstitious," she says, "but to see my anniversary gift broken, it seemed like an omen. I was sure that something had happened." "Well, I'm back," Charles says, "safe and sound. That's why I tried to telephone you," she says. "You," Charles says slowly, "but you knew I was at the office. Miss Inglewood gave me a number and locked it," Marsha says, stepping into the doorway of the bathroom. And she asks, "Who is Beryl Abbott?" "I haven't the slightest idea," Charles says. "That isn't true," Marsha says. "She answered the phone." "Well, I don't know what number Miss Inglewood gave you, but it was obviously the wrong one. When I'm in Lockton, I always stay at the Willow Hotel. Don't lie to me, Charles," she says. "That cigarette lighter was hers, and those initials were hers. You've been carrying on with this Beryl Abbott."
It's true, isn't it?
I won't have you checking up on me. Suppose I happen to see a woman in Lockton. What of it?
He's a dog, Peeps. When you run out of lies, the last resort is always the truth. And in Marsha's case, the truth is a cement block to the chest. She's got to be feeling some kind of way having his mistress thrown up in her face like that. I feel for a sister girl. I really do. But brother man, karma's waiting on you. I know that much too. Well, Peeps, Charles is at Beryl's place, and I guess he's told her the whole thing because she asks, well, how did you get out of it? It was kind of ticklish for a moment, he says. My secretary has this number in case the office has to get in touch with me. She wasn't supposed to give it out, but she didn't think that applied to my wife. And why would she? What did you tell her? Beryl asks. I told her I wouldn't see you anymore. You didn't really mean that, did you? He just stares at her. She gets up and walks over to where he's sitting. What do you think, he says. Just the same, I think you ought to change your phone number. All right, she says, I'll get an unlisted one tomorrow. Then she adds,
If we were married, we wouldn't have to worry about other people.
Now, you're not going to start that again, are you?
Well, you might think about it.
I've thought about it.
And?
This arrangement suits me just fine.
wow, and there's the cement block to your chest. Brother man has told you to your face that this little side thing suits him just fine. He has the respectability being a businessman and husband affords him, and he gets to have his cake and to eat it too. He gets them both. And as far as he's concerned, it's working just great for him. Why fix something that's not broken? Nah, you stuck. Sister girl at home is stuck because she's married to this piece of work. You stuck because you are in love. You have expended time, be it months or even years you've been carrying on with this thing. You have invested not only your time, your life, your energy, your heart. You have invested your whole life in this dude who is fine having a wife and having you. And when you put it straight up to his face, I want to marry you. Let's get married, let's get married, let's get married. He has put you off and put you off and put you off until you finally 6 inches nose to nose from each other. He has looked you dead up in your eyes and said he fine with the way everything is going right now. Girl, he is not going to divorce his wife and marry you. And you know this. You too grown. You too old. You know this. Maybe you didn't know it before. Maybe you were hoping and dreaming. But you know what? Sister girl, you know it now. Now what? Okay, peeps. We gonna get through this. Together. We gonna get through this video. We getting through it. But these chicks, I can't help myself. They're with me because I'm gonna have to go off. I got some rants still left in me. Alright, so bear with me. Well, brother man is back home and he's laying up in bed reading. And Marsha is just staring at him. He's chuckling and turning the pages. Then after a while, he closes the book and turns to place it on the nightstand. He and Marsha lock eyes. Then he says goodnight, and he turns off the lamp. He turns over and closes his eyes.
You lied to me. You're still seeing that woman. Lipstick all over your shirt.
Marsha, dear, I'm trying to work it out. You'll have to be patient.
Have you ever heard such, peeps? You have to be patient with me and my mistress. What is there to work out? Marsha asked. Can't you decide between which of us you want? It's not a question of deciding anything, Charles says. You're my wife. I have to protect you. What do you mean, Charles? She asks. Protect me against what? Has she threatened you? I don't care about myself, he says. I don't want you to get involved in a scandal. says the dude who put you in the position of being in the scandal. Okay, moving on. There's nothing she can do to hurt us, Marsha says. She can make it seem a lot worse than it ever was, Charles says. I'd lose my job, of course, but I can move to another city and start again. It's you I'm worried about.
Don't you worry about me. We'll work this out together.
I knew I could depend on you.
Everything's going to be all right.
Then Marsha says, I want you to go to the office in the morning and not worry about it anymore. Then Charles says, I don't deserve you, Marsha. Good night, and he turns on his side and closes his eyes. Sister Girl stares at him a moment, then she lays back and smiles. Then her face goes all straight and serious. Darling, she says, would you mind taking the bus to the office tomorrow? I think I'd like to have the car. I want to do some shopping. Of course you can have the car, Charles says. Okay, wow, is it me? Or was there something scary and unnerving about that whole exchange? Well, the following day we find Marsha driving down the road. She arrives at her destination, address 109. She knocks on the door and Beryl answers. Yes, Beryl says. I'm from the Welfare Association. I'm collecting old clothes. Beryl says, well, I'm afraid I don't have any old clothes. Anything at all will do, Marsha says, no matter how old the clothes. I don't keep any old clothes, Beryl says. It's a worthy cause, Marsha says. Surely you have something that you'll never wear again. Beryl thinks. Well, she says, I tell you what, I'll see what I have in the back closet. If you just come back later. Oh, I don't mind waiting, Marsha says. It's no trouble, really. All right, Beryl says, I'll only be a minute. Beryl steps inside and partially closes the door. Then gingerly, Marsha puts her hand out, pushing the door open. You know what, peeps? Looking behind Marsha, I see Beryl's place is a house in a really nice looking neighborhood. I thought she lived in an apartment. Marsha steps inside and softly closes the door behind her. Marsha scans the area and she heads straight for the kitchen. That chick is walking with a purpose. She's looking at the items on the counter and her eyes land on a small bowl of sugar. She takes the sugar bowl and places it on the counter within reach. Then hurriedly, she goes into her purse, taking out a small envelope and pouring the contents into the sugar bowl. It looks to be a white granular substance, similar, at least visually, to the sugar. You know what, peeps? I'm not even surprised. Didn't I say that chick was looking funny in that bed last night? It was unnerving. That chick was unnerved. I knew it was going to end up tore up. And one of these chicks was probably going to have to take the other one out of the picture. Since that scoundrel, Charles, is sitting around playing games with both of them. Who, at the end of the day, gets his problem taken care of. And that's really what burns me. That's really the tore up thing about this whole thing, is that Charles gets out unscathed because whichever one takes the other one out has solved his problem. Because guess what? Sister Girl on the side, Sister Girl, she was beginning to become a problem. Talking this marriage stuff, divorce your wife, divorce your wife. She was becoming a nuisance with this thing now. And the thrill for that scumbag Charles was starting to dissipate. Because you want to know the heart of the matter, my people? Charles don't love his wife. He don't love her. If he loved her, he wouldn't cheat on her. He would protect her. He would cover her. He would treat her like a wife. And his his mistress, guess what? He don't love her. She just a plaything. She just that spark and that bit of spice on the side. He don't love either of these chicks. And you want to know why? Because Charles love Charles. That's the deal, peeps. And that is the sad commentary all the way around. And that is, he don't love either of these chicks. Now, how pitiful is that? Marsha kind of shakes the bowl a bit, trying to mix the contents. Then she puts the bowl back. She turns and tries to beat it out of the house, but Beryl comes out of the bedroom just as Marsha is leaving the kitchen. Beryl is a bit surprised to see her there. Marsha says, smiling, "I was just admiring your kitchen. It's so practical," she says, walking over to the oven. "Well, it serves the purpose," Beryl says. Marsha says, "You have a beautiful house. Did a decorator do it?" "No," Beryl says. "A friend of mine gave me some ideas." Marsha looks sad and says, "Oh, I see." It seems she feels as if Beryl is talking about Charles helping her. Beryl turns and the both of them walk into the other room. Marsha looks at the sofa and says, "I'm thinking of buying a new divan. May I ask you how much this one costs?" "I really have no idea," Beryl says. And I believe she doesn't, peeps. Beryl is chatting about the clothes and Marsha is gritting out a smile because she knows her husband brought the furniture for this chick. And remember Beryl's earlier comment when they were standing outside talking? That she doesn't have any old clothes? Well, that suggests she's only wearing new stuff. New stuff that's being bought by Charles. Marsha spots the picture of Charles on the end table. "Here's an old raincoat," Beryl says, interrupting Marsha's thoughts.
Here's an old raincoat. Now, maybe some man can use that.
Your husband must be a tall man.
Yes, he is.
I have trouble keeping mine on a diet.
Afraid that I, rather indulge mine.
Thank you.
Oh, goodbye.
Sad. Two women standing next to each other, looking down at the same picture. One's heart is crushed and broken, while the other's heart is yet hopeful. Next, we see that Marsha's home and asleep, while the telephone is just ringing away. Finally, she wakes and answers it. It's Miss Inglewood, Charles's secretary. She says she's been trying to get a hold of her all afternoon. Marsha says, "I went shopping." The secretary says, "Your husband asked me to let you know he was called out of town." "But he couldn't have," Marsha says. "He left the car at home." "Yes, I know," the secretary says. "He took a company car. He says it would be rather late," the secretary continues. "He had to go all the way to Lockton." "Lockton," Marsha says, the phone slipping out of her hand, and she crumbles to the desk. Then we see Beryl washing dishes when...
Well, what a pleasant surprise. Is there something wrong? I mean, you're 3 days early.
Beryl, there's something we've got to discuss.
That's 1950s speak for "we need to talk," which is universally understood to mean, I'm about to say something you're not gonna like. "Marsha's being very difficult," he lies. "I thought I could smooth it over, but I couldn't." Beryl puts her arms around him and says, "Well, I suppose it had to come to a choice sooner or later. I'm glad you're taking it so well." Beryl's face changes at these words. "Oh," she says, and she takes a deep breath. So Marsha wins. Charles says, "Well, after all, I'm married to her." "Sure," Beryl says. "It wasn't any contest at all, was it?" Then Charles says,
I thought if We didn't see each other for a while, a few months. Just long enough to satisfy Marsha, then we could pick up where we left off.
Wow, peeps. He just told her all what he thinks of her. You're not marriage material, sad sister girl. You're on the side material with this dude. And he can go months without even seeing you while living up in his house with his wife during those months. And as for you, you a pickup where we left off chick. Sad sister girl, I feel for you. It's not about condoning what she doing or not condoning. Hey, I'm not the one to judge. This guy is just breaking her feelings again and again, and that's why I feel for her. Beryl says, well, how very clever of you to work it out so neatly. Now, don't be like that, darling, Charles says. I understand, she says. I'll miss you, of course, Charles says. You know that. It might not be as long as we think. And she simply turns away. The car Marsha's driving comes to a screeching halt outside of Beryl's home, and Marsha rushes out of the car without even closing the door behind her. She rushes to the door and rings the bell again and again, then she's knocking frantically. Beryl opens the door, and the first thing out of Marsha's mouth is, "Where is he?" Then she pushes past a stunned Beryl and walks in asking, "Is he all right?" Beryl looks at her and says, "What are you talking about?" "I'm Marsha Hendricks," she says. "Where's Charles?" Beryl shuts the door, backing against it. "You're his wife?" she gasps. "I put something in the sugar bowl this afternoon," Marsha says. "What do you mean?" Beryl asks. "Poison," Marsha says. "I got it from the hospital where I used to work." Beryl stares at her. "You were trying to poison me?" she says. "Oh, dang." "Okay. I never dreamt that Charles would come here today. I tried to telephone you. Maybe Charles was getting one last one for the road. Then I drove as fast as I could to get here in time."
Where is he?
Well, he left here about an hour ago.
We have to find him. We have to get him to a doctor. I'll go to the police.
If you go to the police, you'll have to tell them how Charles got that poison.
"I'm going to the police," Marsha says again. "Mrs. Hendricks," Beryl says, "if he's dead, you're a murderess." "Nothing matters," Marsha says, "except Charles." And she turns and walks out the door.
Who was it?
"Oh, just some women from the Welfare Association collecting old clothes." Then Charles says, "Maybe it's just as well we're calling it off. I'm getting mighty tired of hiding when the doorbell rings." "That is rather undignified," Beryl says, lighting his cigarette, "but it adds spice." "Too much seasoning can spoil any dish," Charles says. Beryl gives him a long look. "Soon your troubles will be over," she says, patting his cheek. "You'll be safe at home with Marsha." "You know marriage does have certain advantages," Charles says as Beryl steps over to the kitchen. "Yes," she says. "I recall making that same remark." "Let's not go through that again," Charles says. Beryl turns the iron under the coffee pot that's on the stove. Then she turns to the bowl of sugar, hesitating just the briefest of moments. Then she picks it up with a sad, sad look on her face. "We did have wonderful times, didn't we, Charles?" "Of course we did, darling," he says. "It was perfect," he adds. "Having that cake and eating it too, yeah, that is pretty perfect." "I wanted it to be perfect," Beryl says. Then she places the sugar bowl on a tray. She places 2 cups on the tray as well. Then she pours coffee into the cups. Charles says, "I'd give anything if it didn't have to be this way."
I'd give anything if it didn't have to be this way.
You sure you don't want a divorce, Marsha?
I'm afraid that's out of the question.
Beryl just looks at him. Then she says, "All right, darling, at least we can part friends." She finishes pouring the coffee, then she picks up the tray, stepping over to the counter. She places the tray down, and Charles says, "I really should be going." "Come on," Beryl says. "Haven't you got time for a cup of coffee?" "With an old friend," Charles says, finishing the statement, "of whom I'll always be very fond," he adds. Beryl looks sadly at him and says, "I hope you always will." Then lifting the coffee cup, she says, "How about one for the road?" "Why not?" he says, taking the cup. "One for the road."
Why not? One for the road.
Well, there you have it, my peeps. One for the road. I have to tell you that the ending did leave me a bit conflicted. I was more than through with Charles. About halfway into this, I was done with that boy and his cavalier behavior towards something that was gutting to women. I wasn't sorry to see his ultimate downfall, but I did feel sorry for Marsha, who, to the bitter end, was in love with that man and was determined to keep her marriage together. You know, peeps, this is the art, really and truly, the art of storytelling. It's not just a beginning, a middle, and an end. It is a story that evokes emotion, whatever that emotion may be, but it evokes an emotion from the beginning, through the middle, and all the way up to the end. And very few people can do that. Keep you engaged in that way, like Alfred Hitchcock. I love him. I love his work. Even if he's not directing it, you still know you're going to end up with a good story. So there you have it, my people. To my subs, thanks for the vote of confidence by your action, by subscribing. I so appreciate y'all. You know what? I know I said often, but I mean it. I truly, truly do. To my viewers, hey, please consider subscribing. To everybody, like, comment, give me that thumbs up, okay? It's always encouraging. So, y'all be sweet now, and be kind to one another. Until next time.